I've got my face transferred on now, and the first thing that I'm going to do is actually just a little cleanup under the nose area. I'm going to use some of the lamp black, and I am going to clean up the shape that is the bottom of the nose where it touches the mustache, so that I got a nice clean edge there to work with. You want to be careful to not create such big crevices where the openings of the nose are. And I'll get the top edge where the skin is touching as well, down the cheeks here. Get that cleaned up a little bit. And I can still, do more touch-up later on if I need to as well. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the eyes, and I'm actually going to use the smaller Jillybean Dirty Dancer. So it's like a number 2 round on one end and like a number 4 blender on the other side. And I'll start by basing in the iris, which is the colored portion of the eyes, and I'm using the aquamarine in Traditions. You could use any color, pretty bluish turquoisey color for in the eyes. I believe Americana, the Calypso, is a pretty color. You could use that as well. Just want to start with something, but I want this color to be nice and bright because I will be putting some darker colors in around it, and I want this to be a little bit too bright to start with because I lose a lot of this when I do my shadows. So just fill that in, nice solid color. And I could have just filled in the whole great big circle and come back and do my black pupil on top or in the center of the blue, but since these eyes are a little bigger to work on, it actually is just as easy to go around that circle. Okay, so then I do want to put in the whites of the eyes, I'm going to put like a little wash of titanium white. So when I say wash, I mean let's thin that down 50% or more with water. So we just get a little transparent coat, just to brighten the corners of the eyes a little bit more than just the flesh showing through. Another thing I want to mention, when you do trace your eyes on, try not to get sharp corners either by the tear duct or the outside edge. Try and keep those corners a little more rounded. Okay, so fill in both sides. If you mess into the blue a little bit, just, in fact, let me just see if I can wipe that out with my blender side. Close enough. Okay, then in the center of the eyes is your pupil, and I want that to be black. Sometimes I can find the right size wooden end of a brush handle that I can dip into the black and dip it into the center of the eye. Another thing, if you're doing a lot of eyes, another thing that would be handy to have is one of those little circle templates that you can get from the office supply stores. And then you can draw your circle a little bit more accurately. And I think if you get it close as can be, you're just fine. Okay, and I'm going to touch up just a little bit underneath the black pupil here. I got a little bit outside the edge. Take a little of the aquamarine and get that cleaned back up. The eyebrows need to have a darker color in them in order for the white lines to show up. So I'm going to thin down some of the lamp black, making it kind of a wash, which is about 80% water, and just kind of roughly stroking, filling those in. You don't want them nice and neat. So just kind of watered down, and just using the round brush to kind of fill those in to begin with. We'll let those dry. Okay, And you can always change the shape of them a little bit more after they've had a chance to dry, or when we go to get our lines in there, it's not a problem. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start right in on some of the shading, and I'm going to use the flesh tone first to cover my graphite lines for where the wrinkles and things are, and then I'm going to use that also to shade the face, the first layer. So this is actually the Americana shading flesh that I'm using. I will be afterwards using a little extender when I go to do the blending, but to start with, I want to thin that shading flesh with a little bit of water, ink-like consistency, so it's about half paint, half water, and I want to use my real fine script brush, and I love the 20-aught mini script by Dynasty in the black gold. I can get a real nice fine line with that. I did transfer my graphite lines for the wrinkles here. I did transfer the wrinkles on, but now I cover them with the shading flesh because that's also the color that's going to go right up against those lines, so it will cover them nicely. So just a thin line, cover up your graphite. And I may add extra wrinkles in here when I go to do my actual shading. I'm going to do just the outer edges of the nostrils, just to cover those graphite lines. Now, you'll notice on your pattern that you had lines coming down the bridge of the nose. If you can possibly not trace those on, I really think that it would be easier to get your shadows in there and not have to cover them up. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of this on the graphite lines going around the eye as well, but I will be coming back and using a darker color. But this just kind of camouflages them to start with. So all around the perimeter of the eye. Just to camouflage those. There we go. Okay. Now, I actually do like to start with my highlights before I do my shadows. For some reason, it's easier for me to see things that pop towards me. And so if I start with my highlights, I seem to have an easier time getting the shape of what I want. So I'm going to use the DecoArt Americana Highlight Flesh. And I am going to use my double-ended brush to apply this and blend it. But I want to use extender now. I'm going to go ahead and use my big flat brush, and I'm going to wipe all the water out of it with my paper towel. And I'm going to take some of the DecoArt Traditions Extender and Blending Medium, and I use this for both Americana and Tradition paints to blend. If you could put some in a little bit of a cup to start with, and I'll dip my big flat brush in there, or I could be using my angle brush to apply it as well. But I'm going to leave it in this brush. I'm not going to clean this brush out. I can just leave it in there. Wipe the extra off on your cup, and then even blot it a little bit on a paper towel, probably till the shine disappears. And then use that to moisten the face. Try not to go into the eyes. Not yet, because we want to start with some highlights first. But even my lines seem to be drying fairly quickly. Now you do need to tip your piece just a little bit to see that there's no puddles. If you see any kind of puddling going on, I want you to take a paper towel and I want you to just gently blot the excess extender off. You're going to find if you work on a wood piece, you use less extender than you do on a canvas. Canvas, you need just a little bit more to be working on there. Because I am using extender now instead of water for all of my blending, I'm going to take my large Dirty Dancer and I'm going to dip both ends into the extender, but wipe them completely off on a paper towel. And I'm going to show you right now, you're going to hear me talking about make sure you clean your blender brush. In between all my blending, this is what I'm doing on the paper towel. I'm going in a circle to get any excess paint off of that brush so that it stays clean at all times. I'm going to actually start with the highlight flesh, and I've got that in my round brush here. And I'll start with, let's start in the middle of the cheek. Cheeks, I think, the highlights in cheeks have been very difficult. A lot of people are trying to put those on with a floated color and you're trying to go around in a circle. This method, I can apply it nice and heavy so that I've got a lot of paint. Now, all I want to do is just barely catch that outside edge with the blender side of the brush. Soft, soft, soft. Blend away that harsh edge. And you've got a nice highlight in the center of your cheek. Same thing on the other cheek. I've got quite a bit of paint on my brush. I'm going to base in, nice big circle. So it's a pretty solid color. Don't thin it down, don't water it down or add extender in there. Nice solid color. Just barely catch the outside edge with the blender to blend away the harsh line. You don't want to lose all that nice solid color in the middle of the cheek. You want to keep that. Now, if you still need a little extra help with softening brush marks, that's where a large mop would come in. I want you to hold it so loosely that it feels like it's going to fall out of your hand. And you just barely tickle the surface to soften any brush marks. You're not trying to push the paint or move it around. You're just soften it. If you need to push it around, that's what your blender brush would be for. Let's also get the nose. I'm going to get the tops of the nostrils. Okay, flip my brush over. Soften that outside edge. Clean my brush in between, make sure I'm getting that extra paint off the blender side. Put some on the other side of the nostril. Nice thick coat, so I have a lot of paint, and just barely catch that outside edge. I don't want to go into the middle of the paint area. Just a little on the outside, wiping my brush off in between because I keep picking up paint with my blender and I want to make sure I keep that clean. I also want a little higher, so if you look at the height of your nostrils, go up just a little higher, and in the middle of the nose here, pretty big circle, but I'm really going to get rid of most of that around the outside edges so you have no harsh edge. There again, if you need to use your mop brush, you can. A lot of times I'm able to just get it with my blender brush and I'm fine. Okay, then I'm also going to go up the center of the nose, kind of a wide line, and it does come down and connect into that round highlight. And it is a fairly thick line there, and then soften the outside edges so that you see no harsh lines on either side. Now, if I were to be pulling my brush this way and pulling the paint towards the eye, I would be extending the color, and I don't want to do that. So if you notice, I want to try to go with the length of that bridge of the nose instead of pulling it sideways. Okay, another spot would be in the center of the bags under the eyes. So between the eye and that wrinkle. And then I want to soften the outside edges. That'll kind of puff that forward a little bit. So just blend away where I start and stop. Same thing on the other side. If I feel my paint is getting dry, I can actually add just a little dab of extender into the paint color. I try not to add any more extender on the surface once I've already put it down there. Any additional will be into the paint itself. Okay, I want to go, let's go under the eyebrows. Sometimes I highlight under the eyebrows and sometimes I do a shadow. It depends if I want it to look like the skin is puffing out or if I want it to look like the eyebrow is casting a shadow and that they're big and thick and sticking out beyond the eyes. Lots of different eye shapes and eyebrows. Okay. I'm also going to put just a little bit between that line above the eye and the eye itself, right in the middle, and soften the starting and stopping points. I'll probably want to get a little bit into the wrinkles also, but I'm going to save that step for the cleanup because I always end up sometimes connecting them with the shadows, and then that'll be a way to break that up. You may find that after this dries a little bit that you're going to want a little bit of you may find that after this dries a little bit that you're going to want to have a little bit more highlight added, so you can come back and do another coat. Now I want this corner of the forehead to bump out a little bit more, so I'm actually going to put this highlight flesh above the eyebrow and then soften that kind of. This time I will kind of pull it so that it softens away from that area. I don't want to go all the way across the forehead. I just want that corner of the forehead to pop forward a little bit more. A little bit more highlight just on that one side. Okay, then that's about it for the highlights on the face. So then we're ready for the shadow. So I'm going to clean my brush. Now this time I don't have to wait for this to dry. I could blow dry it if I want and re-moisten, but I'm not going to. I can just keep going. But this time I'm going to add extender right into my paint color. So just a little drop. Now I did stop and wash my brush. So I want to make sure both ends of my brush, the blender side and the round side, both have the extender in them again. Wipe them off on the paper towel. Okay, but I do want a little drop of extender added into the shading flesh. If you're having trouble blending the shading flesh, you could even take it down a notch and make it shading flesh with just a touch of the flesh tone in it. Sometimes when you jump too quickly in contrast, it makes it a little bit harder to blend. Let's start right up against the outside edge of the nostril, and I'm applying it with the round brush, but I'm also going to pull a little bit down tapered into the mustache area. Flip my brush over, use the blender side to just soften away that harsh line. So much easier than floating color. Blending and the brush on the paper towel in between to get rid of the excess. Same thing on the other side. Lay down kind of a thick line of color and then pull in across the top of the mustache, taper that in. So you'll notice it's made kind of like a triangle shape. And then I'm going to soften away that line. Let's tip this just a little better so you can see I'm always pointing my brush towards the edge that I want to blend. Okay. Little dab of extender into the paint color still. And I'm going to go, let's do the corners of the eyes next. You have a deep crevice between the eye, the bridge of the nose, and up where the eyebrow is. So this is a deep indent. Now you're going to want to go in until you touch the tear duct. And then I'm going to come down the nose. But I want you to see where I've stopped. I did not aim for the outside edge of the nostril. I came in. That's what's going to give me the shape of my nose. Okay, now I need to quickly flip the brush over and soften away any hard lines. And I want to soften the edge towards the eye. And I want to soften away the edge towards the center of the nose. So I'm going to turn this just a little bit so I get a little bit better angle. I don't want a harsh line coming in close to that highlight. Now by being able to lay down a little heavier amount of paint, I find that I have to do less coats by doing this method because I can put the paint down. Okay, so see now I've got a blended edge on both sides, but I've started the shape of the bridge of the nose there. And if I need to go back after and add more highlight to pop up, you know, like the nostrils or center of the nose, I sure can. I'm adding just a touch of extender into the paint again. Let's get the other side, coming right up to the tear duct, coming straight down. I'm aiming for inside of the bridge of, or inside of the nostril area first. Okay, and then blend the edge towards the cheek. Now try not to pull it out. Try to just come down the length of the nose. Okay, and also the opposite side towards the center. There again, I'm just coming down the length of the nose and trying not to pull it into the center. Now if you wipe off too much, put some more back on and do it right away again. You don't have to wait. I want to go above that line, above the eyes, and then I soften the top side. You can certainly switch to the smaller double-ended brush if you need to have a little bit more control for some of these smaller areas, but you're going to find that these brushes do have a nice point on them, so as long as I don't push down too hard, I can actually get a pretty fine line. Soften the top edge, and you'll notice this is blending right into the shadow next to the nose. I also want to make sure that I make this where it touches the tear duct a little softer. Make sure there's no harsh line there. Okay, I want to hit each of the wrinkles. So let's start with under the wrinkle and soften. I want it to be heavy enough paint that it camouflages where I outlined, but then blend that underside. I still want to be able to see some of the flesh tone showing between the highlight and the shadow. So if you have a problem and your shadow goes right up against your highlight, it's a real easy fix. Let me just take my other blender brush and show you right now before I forget. So if I got my shadow right up against my highlight and there's no flesh separating them anymore, I would go ahead and get some of my flesh tone, which is what we base coated with, and I would put a separation between the highlight and the shadow. I'd put a little line, flip my brush, and then just soften that, because you want to see that transition between the highlight, the flesh tone, and the shading flesh. So really easy way to fix it when you're using the extender. Okay, let's continue getting the wrinkles. There again, if it's easier to switch to the smaller one, you can. Don't try to make these sharp lines anymore. You want them to be a little bit fuzzier. So just kind of tap those in, and I'll come back with some highlight after and get those in there. I want to get a little bit on the outside edge of the face also, but I will be putting some blush color in there, and that'll make a difference as well. I'm always trying to turn my piece so that I'm pointing towards the edge that I want to either blend or erase. Soften that in. And let's even go up into the forehead a little bit here. Now this side I'm going to come in a little bit further because I've got a little bit more of a shadow on that side of his face. So I will pull that into the forehead a little bit further than the other side. The other side I had more highlight, this side I have more shadow. And just soften any harsh line away. Okay, we'll get the wrinkles on the other side. I want to make sure that I've got a soft transition here too between where the corner of the eye is and that little bag under the eye. Just remember, little dab of extender into your paint color. Let's go under the wrinkle. And that does connect into the shadow, into the nose. Under the other wrinkle. And sometimes I'll come back and add even more wrinkles in to help just give it a little bit more character. They don't need to be nice and neat. I do want to come right to the corner of the eye there. And just kind of soften them with your blender side of your brush. I do want a little bit on the side of the face, but not as much as I did the other side. So a little bit on the forehead. And a little bit coming down the side of the cheek. And just blend away that harsh edge. All right. I do like to put just some faint wrinkles up in the forehead. So I've just got extender in the color, and I just kind of draw some lines in the center, kind of these little wavy lines, and then soften them with the blender brush. I think they're better just to draw in with your brush rather than trying to transfer with a graphite paper. Make sure you get rid of your starting and stopping points, really get those blended in. And if I get too carried away and I have to add some more highlight back in there, I can. Or sometimes it's just really cleaning your blender brush good and just using that to kind of wipe out some of the excess that you may get in there. Okay, I also want to get some on the bottom of the nose. So let's get the bottom side of the nose, bottom of the nostrils, bottom of the tip, shading flesh, flip the brush over, soften that in, and I will be putting some color in there, some blush color in the center of the nose after too. Under my lip, I like to actually put a little bit of flesh under there. Now, when I was working on this, I went ahead and just put my beard right on up to the lip, but I'm going to stop right now and get, let's see, let's use the flesh tone. And let's put a little bit of skin, because sometimes there is skin under the lip, and I'm going to kind of blend that in. I'll come back with my beard after too. But I'll kind of pull little strokes down in, blend that into the beard a little bit, because I'm going to want to put some shadow down under there. Because if you look at photographs, you know, there's so many different beards out there, and the one that I was looking at actually did have some of the skin showing, and then the beard kind of came up in the more in the middle underneath the lip itself. Now there was more shadow off to the one side. I'm going to take the shading flesh and a little drop of extender in there, and I'm going to get on the one side right above the handle of the eyeglasses there, get some shadow basically kind of filled in, and then I will just soften where I stopped